Yesterday was a massive day for FNAF, with the Ruin DLC getting a ton of new updates, a release date for the Xbox version of Ruin as well, a couple major updates on Help Wanted 2, and much more. Like the video if you end up enjoying, but let's get right into it. So as you guys most likely already know, Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach recently, about a month ago to this exact day, released a brand new Ruin DLC. And while it's pretty safe to say the game's release was a complete success, at least in terms of gameplay and story, introducing new characters, and overall just being pretty fun to play, it still did share a lot of the many game-breaking bugs that Security Breach originally did, especially with PlayStation consoles where at launch the game simply didn't work at all, on top of a multitude of other gameplay issues. However, while these problems for the most part weren't massive and most people got over them after playing the title a couple times, the developers still recently dropped a massive patch note set for Security Breach, along with a massive blog entry giving us a ton of updates on other games, reading, "First, on behalf of all the devs here at Steel Wool, thank you for Ruin's overwhelmingly positive reception," referencing how the game was considered a massive improvement from the base Security Breach. Today, we'll give you a peek behind the curtain to get you all up to speed on what the next few months will look like. Our first post-Ruin patch is being released today. It's a big one, which we will talk about later in this video, and the fact that they said it was the first one means that there's probably going to be more in the future. Speaking of patches, we also have another Security Breach base game patch in development, with the goal of improving the overall quality and performance on PS4 and Xbox One. We expect that to release in the fall. So along with the new patch we got today, nearly 2 years later, we are still getting improvements to the actual full version of the game, which either says a lot about Steel Wool's dedication or the quality of the game, but I'll let you decide. Ruin for Xbox is currently in development, and we hope to get it out before the end of the year. We will let you know as soon as we have a confirmed date, which is our very first confirmation that in fact the Ruin DLC is already getting prepared for an Xbox release, and furthermore, they're actually hoping to get the game out before this year even ends, which was a pretty big surprise for me, because something I and maybe you were very curious about is, at least when the original Security Breach first released, they were actually under a deal with PlayStation that required them to release it exclusively on PlayStation consoles for the first few months, before then releasing it to Xbox, which didn't happen until nearly a year later. However, now it seems like the developers are going all in and are already working on developing the game for Xbox, which is of course amazing news. The Switch port for Ruin has not kicked off, and we do not have an ETA right now. We know that's not the best news for Switch players, but we'd like y'all to know where we are at for the sake of transparency. So, on the other hand, the game is not currently in development at all for the Nintendo Switch consoles, and the main reason for this is mostly just because the Switch is a very behind console when it comes to graphics and storage, so having to compress a game like Ruin on top of Security Breach is going to be nearly impossible, and to be honest, I wouldn't be shocked if they just wait until the next Nintendo console releases at this point. Big exciting news, we have our own massive booth at PAX West this year. We will have some giveaways, a couple of special guests, and most notably, a work in progress demo of Help Wanted 2. Now this part is probably the biggest of them all, because if you didn't know, the developers have been teasing the idea of holding their upcoming game Help Wanted 2 at the newest PAX West event coming at the very beginning of September, and recently rumors have circulated that they were going to show off some Help Wanted gameplay. Along with in a post by Steel Wool themselves, they actually teased the possibility of the Five Nights at Freddy's movie also making an appearance, seen in the cropped out logo in the left. Now I don't know exactly what they are allowed to say since Steel Wool is just the game developing company, but it is nice that they confirmed Help Wanted 2 is going to officially be getting some gameplay this September, even recently showing off their full booth for Help Wanted 2, which looks insane. And on the other hand, I'm very curious to see who the couple of special guests are going to be. Are they going to be developers at Steel Wool, voice actors perhaps? Or better yet, I honestly wonder if it could be somebody or some people involved with the FNAF movie, because outside of this very minor tease, nobody has mentioned the movie showing up here once, and they have seemingly kept its entire existence as a surprise people are going to have to go to the event to see. However, all of that aside, the most important thing that happened today was that FNAF Security Breach actually got itself a massive list of patch notes and changes. For the base game, there were some pretty minor changes, mostly adding some mini console fixes, like fixing haptic feedback on the PlayStation 5, but there were also some notable changes to PC and Xbox as well, such as fixing an issue where Freddy did not lip sync along with his lines after the daycare mission. They fixed an issue where Chica's guitar solo animation was out of sync, fixed an issue where Chica would stray away from her intended path towards food courts during the Showtime mission, and many more. As for the Ruin DLC changes, they changed like 100 different things, so I can't go over them all, but to go over some of the highlights, they they added UI to instruct the player on how to use the flashlight, which I guess is mostly meant for new players, but it removes most of the barrier to entry given when playing Ruin without the base security breach, I guess, as well as removing the mask UI immediately after removing the mask. They also actually went in and added an audio cue when Roxy responds to camera distractions as well, which once again I think will make things just a little bit easier to understand when first playing, which is nice. They added missing sounds to some objects Cassie can walk through while wearing the mask, along with adding the pizza helpy indicator in parts of the game that take a while to load, which honestly is a bigger of a deal than you might think, because there were multiple times throughout the game where my game either frame dropped a ton to load or even completely froze. So it's nice that they're adding more indicators to let people know when things get stuck, although I'd like for them to just solve the game freezing in the first place. Moving on to some actual bug fixes, there were also a ton of changes here, such as they actually changed Monty's collision hitbox a little bit in an effort to make his section of the game actually harder and have him get stuck on things less, which will be interesting to see play out in the long run, especially since I wish they upped the difficulty of the game entirely, because it's admittedly too easy, but it's nice to see some work being done to Monty. And in fact, in the water section, they also made it easier for Monty to catch the player as well, which is another minor bug fix that will help things a bunch. They apparently fixed an issue where Cassie will no longer get jump scared by an invisible mini music man when going the wrong way in the vent system leading out of Fazbear Blast, which I have never encountered before, but that sounds like a terrifying way to die, to say the least. One of, if not what I think is the biggest change of this entire patch, was also that the horde of mini music men near the giant shoe child node will now go to the expected location when Cassie uses the intercom from Cam 4, which is referencing how when sometimes trying to distract the mini music men in Ruin using the camera stations, for me anyway, 90% of the time, at least a couple of the mini music men would just simply not move and I would die every single time in that area. And debatedly, even more importantly, generally they fixed a big problem a lot of people had where you could put your mask on and take it off inside of different objects, which it seems like for the most part should now be solved. And for controller players both on PC and PlayStation 5, they made some minor tweaks to the way that the controllers worked and their haptic feedback, while with PlayStation only, they solved some of the issues that caused the mini music men to actually spawn in floating by their nodes, which sounds like a nightmare. They fixed an issue causing Monty to sometimes not follow Cassie into the area near the second conduit puzzle in the log ride area. They fixed an issue causing the game to crash when attempting to quit to the main menu during some of the Mimic cinematics. And finally, they fixed an issue causing non-functional change hint buttons to appear on the loading screen. Now, along with the bug fixes mentioned here, there were also a ton of other bug fixes and changes I didn't mention in this video that were all just some general quality of life or clipping and crashing issues, overall just making the game run a lot better, which at least as far as the patch notes go seems to have been done super well here. And this is exactly what I think the original base security breach needed when that first came out. The Ruin DLC came out mostly fine with admittedly a few bugs, but it was still a massive improvement. And then less than a month later, they came out and washed over the rest of the issues as they began working on porting the game over into other consoles. But while you guys are playing the new patch or waiting for security breach on your console, make sure to watch this video here for some massive FNAF movie news, including new scene leaks and early release dates. Subscribe and peace.